I'm a homework junkie. I'm like homework queen. I never want to go into any interview if I don't really understand it and know about it. Because if you go in that way, you'll never make a mistake. You'll never be caught not knowing something. I mean, that's just.
And you won't be as nervous.
And you won't be as nervous because you'll know that you have this bunch of information in your head.
So you know that I've researched your life inside and out.
I can tell. Yes, thank you.
Sometimes I hear people refer to you as an overnight success, but I wonder how many people realize that in order to pursue your creative ambitions, you've had to suffer through poverty and homelessness. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. 7 years of sacrifice, being a single mother with no funding, no substantial family support. There came a time in my life where I had to choose between paying my rent or mounting my productions. And needless to say, I pursued my dream.
You know, one of the reasons I wanted so much to interview you is so that I could tell you that as a kid, I was very badly bullied, and your rendition of In My Own Little Corner from Cinderella got me through some of the darkest and toughest moments of my youth. And I just want to thank you for such a hopeful and healing performance.
It's so sweet. Thank you. I'm very moved by that. You know, there are no words for how much that means to me.
You were badly bullied as a child because you had dark skin and you had dyslexia and they called you a sissy and worse. But it's your reaction to that bullying that I found so fascinating. I got the sense from your book that the bullying actually made you angry and motivated you to succeed. Am I right?
I almost want to thank the bullies in my life because it really motivated me to really kind of push to be, you know, the best that I could be.
Jonathan, you've spoken publicly about being bullied as a child, and we have that in common. And you were also a very shy child. How did you overcome those issues to become the person you now are?
Oh, good question. Just having a pursuit, having something that you love is so much more powerful than any other person's hate. That's what got me away from the well of depression. The bullying itself, it's a consequence of not understanding how your actions can affect others. It can have an unknowable effect.
I think that the shock as a young person of knowing how cruel some kids can be is a very traumatizing experience. It was for me, and I'm sure it was for you. But I want to tell you that the best revenge is being successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is.
You know, Justin, you wrote something very insightful in the book about bullies. You said that often bullies are kids who are seeking attention and approval from their peers because of what they're going through at home. I want to tell you something, Justin. I was badly bullied at school, and I hated those bullies. But you made me realize that maybe some of those bullies were actually abused or neglected kids just seeking attention. And what you wrote has actually helped me to forgive them. And I want to thank you for that.
Wow, that means a lot. Thank you so much.
Now, just to give people an idea of how manipulative your partner was, he orchestrated things so that he could be at the 1988 Olympics, but your own parents had to stay home and watch it on TV. Looking back, given the person that you are now, do you find it hard to believe that he was able to get away with doing that?
You know, it was what it was. I don't play those old tapes. I learn from them.
So if you could go back and talk to that young Joan Lunden who was just starting out in the industry, what would you have said to her?
You know, my husband always says that if you took a page out of the Joan Lunden playbook, it would be, whenever anyone asks you if you can do something, just say yes, and then go figure out how to do it.
I want to quote to you something you wrote in the book. You said, "This business can bring out the worst or the crazy in some of the most level-headed people, and as they get more and more successful, it only gets worse." Why is that?
You know, I have found that I don't know of any other industry that literally your life is like winning the lottery. I mean, you could be a struggling actor living on your friend's couch, go to an audition and you're co-starring in Batman. because you nailed it out of 2,600 people. I have friends that literally were couch surfing, living in friends' cars, that got an audition and literally became a household name overnight, and they're making millions of dollars. I can't think of an industry other than the entertainment industry, music, film, theater, that allows somebody without an education, without 6 years of college, to literally get zapped by lightning and win a lotto.
She knew who Bettedavis was and who the public wanted. And she always gave that to the public. Behind closed doors, that's the little Yankee woman who would polish her own silverware. Many times she was like my mother, my grandmother, my best friend.
In 2006, you became a full-time coach. Are you the kind of coach that you would have liked to have?
Oh, that's a great question. And I've never been asked that. And the answer was yes.
Have you ever played a role that closely resembled your own personality?
Well, listen, if you talk to some of my boyfriends, they'll say any villain. You name it.
Bert, I don't know how to put this delicately, but is it true that the network received complaints because of the bulge in your tights?
Yes, yeah. The Catholic Legion of Decency complained that Robin had too big of a bulge. Okay, well, man was not built for tights, right, Harvey? I mean, no. Okay. All these wardrobe guys, they were thrilled. They tried to come down with every contraption in the world to reduce the swelling, and none of it worked, of course.
You were a boy wonder in more ways than one. Do most directors respect your input when you say, this just doesn't feel authentic?
Yes, in film, not in TV.
Let's face it, Greg. You had to strike a balance between focusing on pleasing yourself by doing your best and focusing on outperforming your competitors, which is what you have to do to win.
You don't break world records by thinking, okay, that's my competition, and so keeping an eye on them. So you have to have the courage and the guts to leave everybody behind and not worry about what anybody else is doing.
Right.
That's how you break world records.
Now, the couple that hid your family also are not portrayed as particularly nice people. I got the impression that when the money stopped coming, the soup got thinner.
It absolutely got thinner because they didn't have money to buy food. Don't forget that they were a family of 5 before they hid 6 Jews in their barn. They did keep them alive. They didn't turn them in, and that may have been self-serving.
I found myself really struggling with how to assess these people. On the one hand, they don't come across as really generous, but they did something that they could have been killed for.
I know, that's really, I'm on the fence. It's like I say, it's not my place to make the decision. I wasn't there. But they did what they did for money so that they could live a better life through the war. They didn't do it because they felt bad for the Jews that were being killed. They didn't do it for righteous reasons.
You're not just a filmmaker, you're an activist. And I see your new film, Velvet Jesus, as a fusion of artistry and activism. And I admire you so much for drawing much needed attention to important social justice issues through your films.
There's so many conversations that we avoid in the African American community, and I think it's time for us to pull the curtain back and look at those things and discuss why they're so taboo in our communities. Because on the other side of the curtain is healing.
You've spent most of your life studying and training your voice. Is performing getting easier for you as time passes?
In the most literal sense of the physical body, absolutely. But I always get nervous every single time. Even for an interview like this, I get nervous to exist in front of other people.
Well, I understand you've had struggles with anxiety and stage fright. How are you doing now?
As a person in general, a whole lot better.
Marissa, at the height of your eating disorder, you were 5'8" and 112 pounds. When you looked in the mirror, what did you see?
Honestly, I wasn't unhappy with myself when I looked like that. I know it's a thing with eating. Everybody has their own unique story with it, but some people, like, no matter how much weight they lose, they look in the mirror and hate themselves. I was pretty pleased with myself.
Now, Greg, I am not going to ask you about the dive when you hit your head, that whole ridiculous non-issue about the blood in the pool, because it's 2021 and everybody knows that there was absolutely no risk of HIV transmission to any other athlete. My question for you, though, is this. How did you, in 5 minutes after suffering that head injury and being sewn up, how did you gear yourself up emotionally to get back up there on that platform and perform a perfect dive? What was going on in your head?
Well, it was funny because my coach, Ron O'Brien, he said, okay, we don't have much time, do you want to continue? He said, if you say no, that you don't want to get up back on the board, I'm going to support you 100%. And so he asked me if I wanted to get back up there or not. I had 2 more dives. And I said, you know what, I don't want to give up without a fight.
George, your book is so full of fabulous memories that I hated to get to the last page. I mean, you got to meet the Queen and Princess Margaret. You got to watch Mario Lanza record a song. You watched Elvis Presley screen test singing Blue Suede Shoes. You headlined in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace. You've had dinner with Noel Coward, Marlene Dietrich, Brigitte Bardot, Frank Sinatra. You were best friends with Phyllis Diller. You sat next to Liza Minnelli at the premiere of Cabaret. Who else do you know that's lived that kind of life, honestly?
Wow. Well, I never thought about that really, but you're right. I mean, just hearing what you've just said is kind of bowls me over, because I thought, yeah, my God, I was there with those people. It was great.
Now, of course, many of your early albums concentrated almost exclusively on the songs of composer and playwright Frank Wildhorn, who was your husband at the time. Some music critics and fans said that you were limiting your song choices too much during that period because they wanted you to sing the songs of other songwriters. Looking back, do you think they were right?
Yeah, very much so.
Well, what was it about the Cinderella character that resonated with you so deeply? Because we could see it.
I did not think of it as a fairy tale. I thought of it as I didn't think about it so much as feel it. I became her, that feeling of wanting love and being so longing for something that she didn't have, and being isolated and not part of, and not included, and just all of those feelings were very real to me.
You wrote that being a Secret Service officer was a constant struggle for you because you had to be suspicious and untrusting of every member of the public you encountered, and it's just not your nature. You even got into trouble for doing a good deed for someone who asked you to hold her purse while she went on a White House tour. Do you think you just didn't have the right personality for that kind of job?
Looking back, I do agree with that a little bit. I think as much as my passion was in law enforcement, and it still is, I still love law enforcement, I think that my personality is not cut out for it.
If someone asked you to make a movie about your experiences with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, would you ever do it?
Actually, it's a very nice question to ask, because it's a relevant question, because I had a script written about this very thing. It's a very hard thing to make. First of all, who plays her? Secondly, it's not about them. It should be about me in my state of cultural confusion dealing with these 2 major stars.
Please forgive me, but I just have to say this, just in case some people out there are thinking, oh, well, she's Barbra Streisand's sister. She's had everything handed to her on a silver platter. She never had to work for the success she's had. I want people to know that it is so not true. I followed your career from day one. Your sister was focusing on her career, not yours, and you've worked hard for all of your success. There, I said it. I'm glad I did, because you're too modest to say it, but I did.
Thank you. No, I mean, my sister she's a legend. She's an icon. I'm not my sister. I'm Rosie, and I love what I do. I want to make people happy in their hearts.
Martin, if I understood your book correctly, your family knew where you were because your brothers would occasionally visit you, and you went to visit your mother at least once after one of the dogs died. Were you surprised that the police didn't simply apprehend you and deliver you to Child Protective Services?
No, because they didn't do it with anyone. There was no Child Protective Services.
There's a very sad passage in the book where one night, 3 months after you ran away, you were feeling homesick. So you went to your house and you looked in the living room window. You saw your family watching TV and they looked happy and content. You felt they were happier without you, so you left. Martin, that's heartbreaking that you felt like such an outsider in your own family.
I went to the house because, you know, you need company, right? Everyone needs someone to hug them. And that, you know. And I was weak that night. I was really hungry that night. It didn't go well that day.
Detroit, where I lived, was basically in the area was all black, so we weren't racist against each other. And you see whites on television or whatever, but you know, you didn't interact with them too much. You just didn't think about it. My mother, I remember we were in Detroit, we were sitting at a restaurant called Kresge's. Well, we sat there at the counter for, you know, an hour at least, and people were getting served all around us. And so we sat there, and then finally the lady came up and said, you know, we don't serve Negroes here. That's the kind of thing that you grow up with, and you realize that that fight was a continuum, and it was a work in progress. We still have a long way to go, but I think what happened with the George Floyd incident and everything, that pulled the sheet off of America. America and other places look at themselves quite like they do now, look in the mirror and say, wow, we were really doing black and brown people pretty bad. And you know, normally they could go in their communities and forget all about it. But this pulled the sheet, and it's in the forefront of the television every day. And even though it's a hard pill to swallow, to understand all systemic racism and everything, it's something that has to happen.
Now, Shernita, you come from the Deep South. Tell me about the realities of the racism that you've witnessed and encountered.
Wow. So if I go back to my earliest beginnings, was as a little girl in that same town. And it's crazy, oddly enough, my best friends were white. And she was the first one that I heard the word nigger from. I was riding her bike one day on the sidewalk, and she told me she was ready for her bike. I said, well, let me turn around and come back. And when I passed by her, she grabbed the string and ripped it and said, nigger, get off my bike.
I really wanted to believe that the civil rights movement had changed everything. What I didn't realize then, which I still have trouble realizing to this day, is how resistant to change people really are. The reason I knew that I wanted to write a book about the civil rights movement and at least inspired by my own participation in it, was that because it was not it was being swept under the rug. I had no problem writing her fear because I felt it every minute of the time that I was in Mississippi and also in Louisiana. There are like maybe 4 or 5 pivotal incidents in the book that come from my experience. The police used to have their shoe shine right across almost from the apartment that we had. And 2 guys went across to the corner store, but they didn't come back up the stairs to the apartment. So I went downstairs to check on them, and the police were there. As soon as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, a cop put the gun to my head and said, if you take another step, I'll blow your effing brains out.
Now, Lucius, you play the role of Prideful, who's the right-hand man of the overseer or the head slave. He clearly loves his people, but he also wants to stay alive. You did an amazing job of portraying the moral dilemma that he was caught in. I can't even imagine how you prepared for such a role.
You know, unfortunately, or fortunately, it's just the experience of being Black in America, to be honest, that I had to just tie into and reach in and express.
Phyllis, we all know that Hollywood, like the rest of America, has been plagued with isms and isms and isms. Do you think the opportunities in Hollywood for people of color have finally started to improve in recent years?
I think the opportunities for people of color has improved a little bit. And I say a little bit because we still are expected to be,
you know, I'm richly melanated, so they're probably going to give me the role of a prostitute or a junkie or a welfare mom, as opposed to seeing me in some of the roles, you know, as an ambassador or as whatever, you know, anything. I can be anything. And I used to say that I can do anything but look white. And even now with special makeup, I can do that.
I know a lot of people are saying that things are getting better for people of color in Hollywood, but what about for Black gay actors? I keep hearing that homophobia still rules the day when it comes to openly gay actors.
It definitely does. I don't understand when people put these limitations on who and what you can be as an actor.
Well, it's homophobia.
It's definitely homophobia.
Spencer, I know this about you because I know you. You're a spiritual man, but you've had issues with the church in the past, haven't you?
Oh, God. I've had so many issues with the church that and my mom will be upset to hear me say this, but I'm just going to speak my truth. I don't feel comfortable in the church anymore.
Now, I want to get a little bit into your life. You are openly gay. You came to terms with being gay in your late 20s. What was it like as a gay man to be a high-profile Hollywood director in the 70s and 80s?
Well, first of all, there was no question of even declaring oneself. I was firmly aware of homophobia in the industry, and it still exists, by the way. We know for a fact that there are 2 or 3 major stars who've never come out, even though a few have. I couldn't afford to be gay publicly or professionally. I had to be very discreet.
In 1987, you directed a British television drama entitled Intimate Contact, which was one of the first films to deal with the issue of HIV and AIDS. It was about a married man who was leading a double life and who had to admit to his wife, played by Claire Bloom, that he had AIDS. What no one on the set knew is that while you were filming this movie, your own partner of 12 years, Ian, was dying of AIDS. How did you get through that?
It was something that I don't wish on anybody else to happen to them.
Now, you've lived a long time in the public eye as a closeted gay man. Only a very close circle knew for sure that you were gay, although there were rumors, and every gay man, including me, was hoping that you were gay. The obvious question for many people is, why didn't you come out sooner? What were you afraid of?
I was out to friends and family. But when I signed on with an agent, the William Morris Agency in '84, you know, they said, tone down the gay thing. So it was kind of my policy just not to discuss my sexual identity with members of the media. Even in the diving world, you know, that was a whole issue, you know, because the diving team is very small. And when we travel abroad, you know, it's like, you know, they would have a meeting without me and say, you know, figure out who's going to room with the fag.
Brian, I want to ask you a little bit about your personal life. In 1998, the media disclosed that you were gay, and the impression that was created was that you were outed by an ex-partner in a lawsuit. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very accurate, yes.
I understand that you told your parents you were gay at the age of 12?
Yeah, I came out to my parents very early.
And how did they react?
They were incredible. I mean, I never had any reservations about coming out to my family because some of my youngest memories were, you know, when I was 4 years old, my mom would take me aside and say, you know, just so you know, no matter who you love, you know, we'll always love you. We just want you to be happy, and then we'll be happy. And I never really knew what those words meant at the time. But then you get to that age where you're starting to, you know, grapple with those feelings and being different from other people. And I always knew that that was something that was just never going to be an issue with my family. I knew that I could tell them and that they'd be there and support me and love me. So that was always a huge weight off my shoulders.
You've been writing poetry since you were 11 years old. You wrote a book of poetry called Turn Left at Greenland. And at one of the concerts I attended, you recited your poem, I Am, which brought me to tears, actually. Is there any chance you could recite even a little of it for us?
Oh, I think so, if I can remember it, but I will. I can't believe you know all this, these facts, Harvey. It's blowing me away. Let me see if I can remember it, and I'm sure I can. Let me just get my brain around it. Am I the pebble lying in the stream, or the water freed from melting snow? Am I the dreamer's sleepless dream that has no home, nowhere to go? Am I the thought to build a bridge between 2 points of view? I am at least one thing I know, a solitary monument that always longs for you. Am I the quiver of a desert flower, or the roots that lie in sacred ground? Am I trapped in my ivory tower until the day I knock it down? Am I the curious dragonfly of orange, red, and blue? I am at least one thing I know, a solitary monument that always longs for you.
No words.
Remember to subscribe to the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel, and be sure to check out more great interviews with Harvey Brownstone on harveybrownstoninterviews.com.